We are extremely happy today with our Self-Publishing Made Simple work group to welcome Clay Andersen. My name is April Cox, for those that don't know me, and today's topic is going to be everything you want to know about graphic design with Clay Andersen. We are going to do a little welcome and check-in with our author work group, and then we're going to move on to Clay's presentation and do some Q&A with Clay. So I hope everybody is happy, ready, excited to begin, and moving along well with your activities so far. So let me just start by saying, are you on track? Now, I know a lot of you have come in different areas. Some of you signed in halfway through your book. Some of you started at the beginning. But this is more for those that started at the beginning of the group. This is the 4th week. So we have, at this point, the manuscript should be edited. Your illustrations, I'm hoping that you have selected an illustrator and started either getting samples or perhaps starting to move forward with planning your illustrations. You should have selected a print option. So in other words, knowing whether or not you're going to move forward with your print on demand, or if you're going to get pricing for your print books and actually print them and sell them yourself or sell them on Amazon, but printed hardcovers. So that is something that you should have decided. Time to start getting print quotes if you haven't already, and I am going to be providing or doing some of that on my own and posting the quotes out on the Facebook group. You should have purchased your ISBNs by now. You should have your Library of Congress control number and start working on your CIP. That's the catalog in publishing. That's the block that goes on your copyright page. So those things should have been have been moving forward. And working on your author platform, your marketing plan, just get started on those. You are starting to think about things like blurbs and hooks and the marketing, the people that you know are your perfect readers. What is it that they're looking for? How do you market to them? What is, what's your marketing plan? And I've introduced that mind map for you guys. And for anybody that wants a copy of it that you can use for yourself to go and just answer questions and really brainstorm on those marketing mind maps, then I'm glad to give you one if you don't already. Just drop a note in the comments and I'll make sure to look that up and make sure everybody has a copy of that. So, does anybody have any questions about kind of the things that are listed here?
I actually still have to get my ISBNs. I've been a little busy, but I am doing that tomorrow. I scheduled about a 45-minute block for myself just to get all of that figured out.
Okay. All right, yeah. Good.
April?
Yes?
If you're getting quotes for printing, do you think you can get some for shipping to Canada? Because it seems that book prices are $2–3 to Canada, and then shipping is $140 per book.
All right, drop your city and state in the comments. So let me tell you the sizes that I'm getting so far. It's 8.5 by 8.5, 8 by 10, 8.5 by 11, and 6 by 9. So if anybody has a slightly different size that you need quotes on, let me know. I've got probably 4 or 5 different places that I'm going to get quotes on, and I'll post them to the Facebook group.
April, what formats would you be getting those quotes for? Paperback or hardback?
I'm going to be getting hardcovers. I'm just assuming that most people are not going to be printing paperbacks, but if you do need a paperback quote, just put it in the comments and let me know, and I will add that to the list as well. Okay. Let me just check what we've got here for the chat. All right. Perfect. All right, so without further ado, I'm just going to put everybody on mute while we have our speaker, and then we'll go from there. And as we get to the Q&A, I'll unmute everyone, but as we go through the presentation, if you have specific questions, you can also feel free to type them in the into the chat, and I'll be watching that and bringing it up for Clay.
I was gonna say, feel free throughout to ask questions if something comes up, because I'm going to walk through a number of things, but I would be happy to introduce or to entertain any questions that you have as they come up. So let me start. I'll share my screen here.
Let me just make sure you're a co-host. So I want to thank Clay for being willing to come and visit the group on short notice. I explained to him that we were talking about graphic design, and that there's a lot of things that go into graphic design. So he was willing and able to come and visit with the group. So I think this is going to be a really great opportunity for us to really learn all about the things that go into graphic design.
All right, great. So I'm going to walk through a number of things tonight. Again, this is kind of just fire hose of information. As you have specific questions that may relate to where you're at with the work you're doing, please feel free to pop a question in there, and April can pass that along. But yeah, so what we'll try to do is cover at least 4 general areas. First is book design, which is obviously kind of where it all starts. But then along with that, art direction, because a lot of times what we're doing as authors, I'm coming at this in 2 ways, as an author and as a designer. I'm not an illustrator. I can't draw a thing. So, one of the things that I will say repeatedly is that illustration and graphic design are 2 incredibly different skill sets, and so a lot of times you'll have somebody who's a great designer who cannot illustrate, or vice versa. Sometimes you get these lucky people that can do both sides. But
Hey, Clay, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No.
We're getting some wind from you. Must be out. You must be outside in a.
No, I have a fan that's oscillating, and I'm going to turn it off.
That's great. Sorry, you're gonna have to suffer.
I'm just gonna have to suffer. I'll be all right.
I just turned my air conditioning off too, if that's any consolation.
All right.
Clay, you're cool without the air conditioning.
So it's not too, and it's cooling down out here, so it's not too bad. So, thank you for. Is my audio okay? Otherwise.
Yeah, it's better now.
You're okay. All right, good. So, anyway, once in a while you will get someone who can do both illustration and design, and so those people always make me jealous, because I wish I could draw, but I cannot. But one of the things that is sometimes forgotten in the process of developing books is that design is actually a major factor. You have an author, you have an editor, illustrator, and designer, and it seems like that piece sometimes gets dropped or kind of skipped over, and it's really quite critical, especially in this day and age where so much of sales happens online, Amazon, etc. And basically you have a tiny little thumbnail with which to grab the attention of your audience, and so that's where especially cover design is quite critical. And you want it to stand out, and so that's an area where I've learned a lot in recent years. I'm kind of I'm a self-taught graphic designer, and have done a lot of web design in the past, and that was actually my job for a time. Right now just manage a web development team, so that's my day job. But I still love design, and so as I got into kids books a few years ago, and after working on my first one, got into the community on Facebook and such, ended up doing quite a lot of design work, and have gotten to work on a number of books that I'll show you here. But so I'm not a trained expert necessarily, but I have developed skills over the years, and I have some wisdom, I think, that I can share with you guys. So anyway, we're going to start with book design, and I want to start by looking at some covers. And so there's a number of covers. You'll probably recognize some of the names here in the list, and we're going to take a look at some of these covers, where they started and where we went, how I gave some suggestions or changes to the cover to try to make them better, and I'll try to explain why those improvements added to the value of the cover. So we're gonna start. So Pragya often, anytime she puts out a book every 2 weeks, it seems like. So every time she's got a new book that she's working on, she often texts me or Facebooks me and says, "Hey, can I get your feedback?" And so this was one that she released just recently, and it's actually great. She does great work, and so this is a really strong cover to begin with. But this is where we started with it, and just to give you an idea, this is where we ended. So there are some small tweaks here, but I think it takes it from being a little disjointed to quite cohesive here. And so just to point out a few of the things that we did to improve the cover, and she made some other changes beyond this, but this was what I provided to her as a suggestion, and it ended up being pretty close to this. One of the biggest things is making sure you have a focal point, and a single focal point. Everything on your cover needs to drive to that focal point. And that means the title, the characters, whatever is happening. Obviously, the emotional focal point here is what's happening between the big bug and the little bug, and in this peanut butter sandwich. There's some additional activity going on over here, some other bugs looking in, but in the end, I think this almost becomes more of a distraction, that there's too much going on. There's too many places for your eye to go. So what we did is just drop those out. You also notice that I've added a little bit of what we call vignetting, or kind of a gradient here, that draws the eye right into this area in the center. And so there's some shading that also contributes. It helps your eye find a spot to go and find where it's supposed to go. The other thing is that we make sure we have some strong alignment over here, that the whole piece, the whole title, works as a unit. And one of the things you'll also see that I tend to do in a lot of the designs is find some way to interact the illustration with the title itself. So in this case, we have the little bug kind of just standing on the words. You don't want to obscure the words, but you want to kind of create that interaction between them. The other great thing is that when you do that, you actually push your illustration forward. So there's kind of a three-dimensional effect that happens, where instead of the title and illustration sitting next to each other on the page, you're pushing the illustration forward, which grabs the attention of your reader. Another huge thing is just making sure you have complementary fonts, and I'll talk a little bit more about fonts in a little bit. But Pragya just had a couple of fonts of the byline fonts here at the bottom. Yeah, it's just kind of a standard serif font. So I looked around and found one that's a little more hand drawn, that kind of resembles some of the fonts that she's used in the title, and just brought those in instead. And then you also see in here just emphasizing the names of the artists and the author, and kind of downplaying the title, the story artist, color artist, just by changing those colors. So you get some better consistency there. Whereas in here, it just kind of all flowed together, and you can't tell which is the name and which is the person's title, and so a little bit of formatting there helped. Megan Rao posted this a while back. Sometimes I'll just jump in. I just have so much fun with this, honestly. Sometimes and you probably noticed in the Facebook group, somebody will post a cover, and a lot of times I'll just kind of jump in and say, hey, what if you tried this? And so this was what she posted, which is, I think, a strong cover. It's got a nice focal point, great color, the gradient's a lot of fun. You get this good font that works well. And one of the things that you want to look for pretty much anytime you're looking at a cover is if there's any sort of patterns that you can repeat. Like in this case, you have ninja and knight, and they both start with the same letters. So putting them on top of each other and making that pattern visible in your design is a way to strengthen that. And so, and I'll give you a couple of examples of this. But here's what we ended up doing. The words in the, and her final version isn't quite like this. It's a little different. But this is what I had recommended her. But downplay the words in the, and then stack these so that the N-I and the five character words are stacked on top of each other, so you get a pattern. You get more of a cohesiveness to the design in that way. Also added, this felt like the moon was cool in the background, but where is this ninja running? And so adding some trees in the background can add some context to what's going on there. And then some gradient here always helps kind of flow your eye downwards. So you want your eye to, a lot of times you'll hear the pattern with cover design is you want the person's eye to start at the top left and move to the bottom right. And then obviously the next step is to open the book. So most of the time, this is not a hard and fast rule. Most of the time you will see that the characters are directing their energy to the right. So in this case, the ninja is running from left to the right. And a lot of times the flow will be from up here, and then you slowly you make your way down across the page to the bottom right. And that tends to be a strong way to present that. So that's one here. Let's see. I'll jump to. Let me jump over to. Well, this is a good one to talk about the patterns. This is one I did a long time ago. That there was Kathy was struggling kind of to make this work. How do you get this? She had these two ideas, and the fonts aren't quite right here, and the breaking apart of the stack of animals didn't quite work, and so she was playing around with different things. But here's what I ended up recommending to her was, again, the ILES is what's getting repeated, and so by stacking them, you make it a lot stronger. We also, instead of breaking apart the stack of animals, put them back together, put her name bottom right, which kind of sets it aside. So you have this stack of animals, and then even though typically you probably wouldn't write a line, a title, in this case I think it works again because you're repeating this pattern. And then the small words, the ampersand and the of, make them smaller, color them a little differently so that they don't become a focal point. So so that's what we ended up with that. I think a lot of you have probably seen Leticia's book, The Adventures of Mr. Macaw. She was struggling with this as well, and I absolutely love the artwork here. And I wanted to. This is one where I jumped in and kind of offered my help, because I'm like, this artwork is great, but how do you advance this? How do you make this work better? I have the title; it's just kind of stacked. And the byline's down here, and then this is a bilingual book, so she wanted both titles, which is important. But then this gorgeous bird, kite, that macaw, that really is the focal point and obviously the title of the book. And then these kids, all the emotion is right there, but this is way tiny in the corner. So how do we bring that forward? So ended up working with her a lot on that, and this is kind of where we landed. We brought the bird way up to the top, made it a lot bigger, and then looked for a font that would complement the illustration with the shapes and flow of the bird. That's one of the biggest things when I'm looking for a font. I want it to look like it works with the illustration. Some of the sorts of lines that you see here, there's just a lot of energy to this particular font, where it's not just straight lines. There's lots of details and curves, and to me that really, and then by drawing on the reds and the oranges that are in the bird and drawing those into the title, you really bring those together. So, and then we're able to make the kids a lot bigger, so you get a lot more expressiveness on the kids' faces. We downplayed the Spanish title a little bit, again, because really Mr. McCall was where we wanted to emphasize that. And again, her designer illustrator made changes after this, but this was a recommendation that I went to her with, and you can see how much stronger, how much more it draws you in, again, by just moving the elements around. Again, there's interaction between the illustration and the title. You see the bird's wing is overlapping the W there. So anything like that, we're pushing the bird into the foreground, and then that interaction creates a lot more cohesiveness and intentionality to the design.
What a huge difference, Clay. That's amazing.
Isn't that fun? This is why I love kind of jumping in with some of these things, because I see some of these illustrations and I love them, but it's like I know how design can help, and Leticia's having a lot of good success with her book, I think, so far. It's been fun to watch. Another one I jumped in on, Andrea Scrimovus had this. I can't remember exactly whether she posted this in one of the Facebook groups or what, but I think actually I downloaded. She may have offered this as a free download on Kindle, but I loved the charmingness, the charming charm of the illustrations. There's just a cuteness to them, and I thought, with they're not quite color corrected properly here, so they're kind of washed out, and then we have some just kind of very stagnant fonts. If we can do something here, how can we make this a lot stronger? And so this was, again, I originally went to her just kind of saying, hey, here's some suggestions for you. I ended up formatting her whole book for you, and I'll show you that in just a second. But this was just I literally did this in a few minutes. Just grabbed a font, say, yeah, this works kind of good, and just say, hey, can we bring your character forward, and put a stronger font across the title. And then what I want to show you here, where'd I go? Is zoom bar is in the way. Hold on a second. So here's where we landed, and this is where we're. This is the final version, and so you can see there's so much more color to it. There's it draws you in a lot more. The font complements her illustration style that she did herself, and then we did a lot of formatting inside the book. So I'm going to flip through this a little bit. Again, when I'm picking a font, I'm trying to match the illustration. So in this case, it's a very simple, straightforward, very there's not a lot of flourish. It's straight characters, like this little mouse standing up here straight, and straight flowers. So I picked a font that actually kind of goes with that. This is I've promoted these on some of the Facebook groups before, but this woman, Kimberly Guesswine, she does just fantastic fonts, and she does some stuff out in the Teachers Pay Teachers, but a lot of her fonts are very, very cheap. Some of them are free. looks like last time I was here, I was finding a font for Kelly's name, so her name is still in here. So that's where that came from. But so yeah, there are. She just does a lot of great hand-drawn fonts that give a kind of an organic feel to and work really well with children's books. So I often draw on that. So this is one of hers. It's I think it's called Plainly Written or something to that effect. And it's just a really clean, readable font, but it still has that hint of being handwritten, which really works well with the illustrations. So as you can see, you know, most of the pages just have a single line of text, and so what all I'm doing is rendering that text and then kind of placing it so that it enhances the flow of the illustration. And so this is just something where I'm just kind of feeling it out on each page, where it feels like it works best. Again, did a lot of color correction to make sure that skin tones are good and colors are popping as much as we can here. Aligning certain things, but keeping it loose, and just doing some other cleanup. But anyway, I really am. She seems very pleased about how this book came out, and again, just a little bit of design. I didn't do a whole lot of work here. Most of this was already there. She had the same text on the page. It just was in a font that really didn't complement the illustrations particularly well. And then, you know, we got a couple activity pages here at the back, questions and that kind of stuff, and did a little bit of layout there, and some other things on the back.
I love the simplicity of it. Very nice.
It is. It's just very charming, very clean, and that's what I wanted to preserve, while giving it you know, a professional look and feel. We also did she did a Portuguese version of this as well, so we basically did the same book, but she had translated it, and so we have that version as well.
Beautiful.
So let's see, let's jump back over to Photoshop a second here. Get to that one. Leave this one off. Sorry, there's probably some I should have left open here. So this was, many of you probably know Carlene's name. When this was quite a while ago when she was first pushing this, one of her first books, The Mango Seed Doll. And she had this cover and she had this one as well, which again, I actually think were pretty strong. What I ended up doing was just redoing the text on this and flipping the character. So again, instead of going right to left, where the character energy is moving to the left, we're going the other direction, and the energy is flowing to the right, the text is flowing to the right, and some text that I think better complements the illustrations. You know, you have these big round eyes that her characters have, and honestly, I think the font kind of captures those same curves, and so you'll see a lot of those symmetries or similarities in the fonts I choose, and sometimes it's unintentional. You just find a font that works really well, but there are times where that kind of thing is very intentional, and where you're looking for a font that really enhances the illustrations that you're.
Hey, can I see the before one more time?
The before? Sure. Yeah. Yeah, so there was the before.
No.
And this one that kind of focuses on the little mango seed, but cuts off the character, and then we ended with this one.
Oh.
So I think it's an improvement. So, let's see. So, let me show you Arnold Henry's. You may
We
know
have a
his,
couple of comments or questions in
Yeah.
the group here.
Sure,
So,
go ahead.
let's see. do you ever recommend handwritten, not purchased font, but if I did my own writing versus computer/typed?
I do if you can do it well. Actually, I think it's gorgeous if it's done well. For my first book, I actually tried to hire a couple freelancers to do some handwritten fonts. You got a squirrel behind me. It's coming to hang out. And it didn't quite work. So I think if you can get somebody that can do it really well, I can't. I do know some friends that do calligraphy work, and in fact, I may pursue asking one of them to do some work on one of my future books that I'm currently working on. But I think if you can do it, great. I mean, the ones that, you know, there's a lot of books out there, especially by large publishers that have a larger budget, with hand-drawn titles and hand-lettered titles. And I think if you can do that, if you have the capacity yourself or know somebody that can do that, I think it can really work well.
Yeah, this is awesome to see that you know, the differences between just having that eye for covers, because if you're not having a really well-designed cover, you're not going to get those clicks, and people are never going to be able to get to the listing page to buy your book. So this is really important and a huge part of what graphic design can do, as well as the beautiful layouts that Clay showed us. Just a time check, Clay. We've got about 20 minutes left for.
Oh yeah, we'll rush along.
I'm wondering if you wanted to cover some of the other things with regard to graphic design as well.
I do. So I'm sorry, I'm spending
and we
so
can
much
go
time on this.
no, and we can actually go over. I usually stay over with folks
Okay.
here, so it's not that we don't have a hard stop.
Right.
But I just wanted to give you a little heads up with regard.
No, and there's a lot more we want to talk about here, but so this is one last one that I'll show you just for Arnold Henry, who's recently released his book. You know, again, I think there was some good things happening in his original cover here, but there's about at least 3, if not 4 different fonts going on, different font treatments, all of that sort of thing. So one of the things, and this is going to be important for your branding as we get into some of these other topics in just a second, is that there's a consistency between all of the things that you're producing. So your book covers, your brand and logo, your marketing pieces, you know, trying to use the same fonts. And usually there's 2, maybe 3 fonts that you should choose for your project, and then reuse those same 2 or 3. They should complement each other. They should work well together. But if you're using, you know, 5, 6 different fonts, or just choosing a different font each time, it will always end up looking inconsistent. So that's kind of what we ended up doing with Arnold's cover here, is just simplifying it. And then I love the you know, the baby's name is Hope, but I love the idea of the waiting ... for hope, and so we kind of split up his title that way, which I think captures the sense that he was trying to communicate there. So again, really with these covers, we're trying to communicate the essence of the book in one image, and that's the challenge there. So okay, let's jump over. So let's look at, I showed you a little bit of book layout. One that I'm just finishing up right now, Nicholas Smith and I have been working together, and you may have seen him post this. He just ran a Kickstarter that was successful for this one. So this was one that was just absolutely gorgeous illustrations. I love the work that his illustrator did. And he had done some just real simple design work. He had picked out this font, which I really did like, but I ended up kind of reworking a lot of that to make it more of almost a logo. And he's using that on his website. He's using that on his promotional materials. And so we get more consistency there. And again, you see it's one font on everything on this page here. So the title, the bylines are all using the same font. Again, same font inside here as we get in. And then another font that we're using for the body text, but again, complemented with this display font that we're using for the title. Mm-hmm. So we're doing some fancy stuff here. This is actually something that I would not have pursued. He actually, his illustrator brought this frame, and I usually go a little bit cleaner, but I actually I love what this ended up looking like, and how well this this frame complements the look, the feel, the color scheme of his illustrations. You have a lot of these olive greens, so we're complementing that with greens in the drop caps and in the frame, giving it a little bit of an aged look. So I added this this kind of parchment feel behind it. Again, trying to capture what mood and are you enhancing the illustrations that that you have from your illustrator. So we'll go through this. There's a couple pages where we don't have a spread on one side, so we kind of added some little highlight images at the bottom of icons. Again, to just add some visual interest. And it ended up turning out to be a really beautiful book. I can't wait to see this printed.
Wow.
So anyway, that one is just, in fact, I have some adjustments to make. I tried to send him files last night, and they were giving me problems, so I got to fix a couple things tonight. That's one. This is my own book, and again, I want to just talk about layout things here. Again, you'll see I have two basic fonts: the title font, and then this this font down for the bylines that I use a lot throughout the book. I'm using another one over here for the dust cover text, but for the most part, it's just these two fonts, and we try to keep it simple. So with this, one of the things that has been a struggle I've noticed in certain places or with certain books is when the illustrator doesn't kind of think through where the text is going to go on the page. So if the page is full of you know, illustration and objects and characters and all that kind of stuff, and there's no thought given to where the text is going to go, that can really make it challenging. So as you're working with your illustrators, make sure you've got that in mind. I think it was she was having problems with that with one of her books, one of her illustrations. So anyway, so just keep that in mind early on in the process if you are, depending on where you are in finding an illustrator. And then my illustrator here, this was somebody I found on Fiverr, and did a fantastic job. And one of the things I liked was just the variation from page to page. So we got a lot of variation. Some of that I encouraged. And one of the things that I had on my list that I want to talk about is back over here. Close it. I've lost it. Anyway, but I wanted to talk about art direction, because as an author and a designer, a lot of what I'm doing sometimes is providing that art direction. So you really want to make sure you understand the feel that you want on every page, honestly, of the book, that you know what's going to happen on this page. And I'm sure as you guys have gone through this work group, there's been a lot of guidance on that sort of thing. But it really, the way the illustrations interact with the design is really a critical piece of communicating and of each page being effective. I love this particular spread. It has one simple line, and the day after that it was full of friends. And so there's this kite that kind of stretches across the page, draws your eye, a lot of little activity, but just one simple line that sits there that communicates the strength. Like this one, I struggled with this one because there wasn't a good place to put the text, and this was one that we probably should have reworked a little bit more, but the text overlaid here just doesn't quite work as effectively. So you can see the difference between when we plan it out and don't plan it out, some work better than others, but I think that's an important piece of graphic design, is seeing how that can work with your illustrations, or how it's going to work with your illustrations.
Question from Rachel. She's asking,
yeah.
What format should photos be taken in so that the graphic designer is able to work with them?
Real photos versus illustrations.
Yeah,
What we
Rachel
mean?
is doing something with some unique like crochet
Ah,
things
yes. Okay.
and taking pictures of them, kind of like claymation used to, but she's doing it
Yeah.
with crochet pieces.
Yeah. You know, the format is not nearly as important as the quality and the resolution. So anytime you're printing, you're going to want at least 300 DPI. But if I zoom in fact, let me show you on Nick's book here, this sunrise image behind the title page here, that's actually pulled from one of his illustrations here, and then zoomed in. And if fortunately his illustrations were at a high enough resolution that even though I expanded the image, I still was able to get at least 300 DPI for this. So that's part of it, is you really want, like, ideally like 1200 DPI, so you're getting a lot of resolution, a lot of data in your image. That way you can zoom in, you can crop it, you can move it around and manipulate it, and still have enough resolution in that image to be sufficient for print. So one of the things, format is important in certain ways. Like you don't generally want to save as JPEG, because JPEG images are what we call lossy, so they're compressed and you lose some of the data each time you compress them. So you know, a TIFF image tends to be better. Raw images are good. So if you are taking photos that are going to be later used in a book, you want to make sure to provide the most uncompressed images you can. That means they're going to be large, multiple megabytes, but that way the designer, the illustrator, whoever's working with that can manipulate it and not have to worry about whether it's going to give them enough quality. So
Great. Couple of questions about the font you used for Me and G book.
yes.
What font was it that you used? A couple of people really love the font.
This one, the text font, this one is called Metaphors, and it's spelled Metafors. Font. And it was, I believe it was a free one. But I do really, I've used that actually in several instances, and it's just a really, it's got some good character to it, and but it's still very legible.
Right.
You know, and that's one of the challenges. Again, anytime you're picking fonts, especially for kids' books, generally trying to avoid script fonts and fonts that are hard to read. Now, I'm going to break my own rule here. You've seen this cover, and you know, this was a font. I wrestled with this a little bit, whether I really wanted a font that fancy, but it really is part of what I think makes the magic of this cover work. So there, again, with every rule, there are times to break that rule, but make sure you know why you're breaking that rule. And so I think there are generally what I'm looking for, and as you can see, the sans font that I used here is something that is organic, but that still is very legible, that kids are going to have no trouble reading. And so this, I know, hopefully most kids are going to still be able to make that out. But even if that's a little bit of a challenge, I don't use it throughout the book. And in fact, I use a different font throughout the book. I want to touch on this a little bit. This is, we're still putting some of the finishing touches on this, and Natalie's sending me some tweaks to this, but I've done most of the layout. One of the things that I try to do here is just add a little bit of visual interest with the layout on each page. So you can see the text moves around a little bit. Natalie, thankfully, you know, she is thinking through where are we going to put your text on each page. But I'm trying to draw out some colors, and so I'm emphasizing some, you know, usually a phrase in each stanza, and drawing out some colors from her illustrations to emphasize those. But even the rest of the text, that's a little bit simpler, I'm still drawing colors from her illustrations for that too. So in this one, there's a lot of browns and oranges and reds. So so the font for the main text is brown, and then we have some pinks and reds that we're using for some of those emphasized text. And same with some of these other ones. So layout, I've just kind of messed around with it to feel it out. There's 2 stanzas on each page, plus then down in the corner, Jesus loves me, this I know. Some of these illustrations are not fully updated, so there's some changes to these, but yeah. So with these, the format's a little different, so we are doing a full spread on each page, which is a little unusual. A lot of times there's more variation. So this book, there's a little bit more structure to it. So what we're trying to do is add a little bit of visual interest in terms of the composition of her illustration, and then using some adjustments to the text as well to just highlight some of those things. So,
like Taryn's wondering, do you recommend text boxes, or do you just put the word? You prefer to put the words on white space on the page?
I used text boxes in Nick's book just because there was a lot of text going on here, and sometimes it flowed over from one page to the next. So in these cases, I tended to use more text boxes because it's more, there's a lot more of the. But for something like this, I sometimes, like this is probably in a text box. This is, this one that's where it's nicely aligned. But in some of them where I didn't align it cleanly, I just kind of plopped it where I wanted it. I did try to make sure like the line spacing is consistent, the kerning is consistent. That's the space between the letters, that kind of thing. So I wanted to make sure that there was a consistency there throughout. So.
Now, earlier when you and I touched base, you talked
Yeah.
about how important it is with regard to branding, that a graphic designer can also help us with branding.
Yeah, so let's
talk a little bit more about that from
talk a
an
little bit
author
about that.
perspective, and why is that important?
Well, so for instance, let me show you some of the stuff I'm working on, the Kickstarter for this. Oh, really? How is that not working? There we go. Okay, so this is the Kickstarter preview that a few of you may have seen. But again, what I'm trying to do here is make sure that there's a brand to this book. It's not necessarily my brand, and I'm trying to create my own brand out here on my Facebook page, and I haven't built a website that I'm happy with yet. So this is where I'm leaning on this at the moment. But there's a little bit of a brand feel out here. I'm working on or I have an LLC that I've registered, and I can show you, like, this is, some of you may have seen this logo that I built for that. So that works okay, but right now what I'm trying to do is actually sell this book, and I don't have any established brand for my LLC, my imprint right now. I'm going to put it on the back of the book, and I'll continue to build that. But that's not where my design capital is. Really, right now, people have started to recognize this book as I pushed it on social media, and so they recognize that. So I want that to pop out. And so what I've tried to do is really emphasize that. So, there's a lot of different things and add-ons and stuff that I'm going to be offering through the Kickstarter. Well, they all look very much of a piece. And so I put this little mock-up together where, it's a repeat of that brand. And, so even like the thank you card and, my headers here, Those kind of things. I'm still drawing on that brand and being consistent. I created a little mock-up for each of these tiers in the rewards, and again, they re-emphasize all of that, offering this canvas print, offering magnets, and again, it's just it's all kind of leading into that. I just grabbed the stock photo, but again, I wanted it to kind of capture the lightning bugs and the stars and that kind of feel. So that's on brand as well. You see the reuse of the fonts, and so that sort of thing. The next book in the series, we're using the same fonts and similar layout. So anyway, that's I think one of the biggest things as you're creating something. Especially as you get into marketing that piece, you're creating a whole brand. You want it to be recognizable. You want, when somebody sees it on Instagram, you want them to instantly know, oh yeah, that's the book that I've seen previously. And so you're building in that recognizance of the book, and as you reuse those elements. So, questions or comments, thoughts?
So Leah says, that's amazing. I'm working on editions now. How do you do all your props? I think she means the mock-ups. Do you have any mock-ups you'd be willing to share?
I'll show you. This is all digital. So I have so none of these in other words, I didn't Photoshop any of these, or I didn't take photos of any of these. I Photoshopped all of them. And so I can turn all of this stuff on my layers in Photoshop and suddenly can see all the different elements. And I've moved these around a little bit. This open book should be over there. So yeah, this a lot of them were mock-ups that I found online, free mock-ups. I think I paid for a couple of them, where you can drop in. Let me show you, for instance. Here's a good one. I wanted to do a mock-up of this canvas, and you know, you drop your artwork in here, you double-click on this. Oops. On this thing, and it opens, paste in my canvas. It came just like empty like this, and so I paste in my canvas and I save it, and suddenly it shows up on the wall and it looks like it's a piece of art on the wall. So I didn't set this up, just found the mock-up. So
where do you find those, Clay?
I just Google, honestly. There's a number of sites out there. There's one called placeit.com, I think it is. This requires placeit.net. So these are it says free. They're not really free. So this is you can generate a mock-up, upload your image right there. It'll build it into the scene. So I mean, you get everything from T-shirts to phones to other things. But a lot of times, what I'll do is, like, you know, I want an open children's book mock-up, and so look for images, and so I've used a couple of these. In fact, this is the one that's top here.
Nice, I like that.
Is that one right there. So yeah, you can really do a lot without a lot of funds, without actually having to set up a photo shoot, without having to have a book in hand. You know, I don't have my new books. I haven't printed these canvases yet. I haven't done any of that, but I needed to render them. So that's what I ended up doing. I found a booklet, little 8.5 by 11 folded booklet one, and that's for this little devotional piece booklet that we're going to do. Just a little square one for the magnet. We're going to do a digital, like, animated version of the book. So I just grabbed a monitor for that, and a phone for a podcast. So we're doing a lot of different elements with this launch.
And there are some people that have this graphic design eye to do things themselves, but
Right.
I am not one of them. So my go-to is just to make sure that I I have somebody who really knows what they're doing from a graphic design perspective to take on that stuff, rather than trying to muddle through it and not doing the book justice.
Right, right. And you know, one of the things that I've said is that I'm willing to do the things that I'm capable and competent at doing, but if I'm not competent at doing it, then I need to find somebody that knows what they're doing, you know, a professional. And so that's where I'm not an illustrator, can't draw anything, but I find a good illustrator. I'm not a good marketer. I'm still learning that. I'm doing quite a bit of that myself, but I'm also leaning on a number of friends who are in marketing, who are helping me with that sort of thing. So, so anyway, none of us can be good at everything that is needed when you're self-publishing like this, but that's where we lean on each other and building each other's strengths.
Laura, you had a question about lettering for the cover?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So I noticed on a lot of children's covers, not necessarily inside, but the uppercase and lowercase letters seem not to always go how they should when you're writing a sentence. They seem that some are bigger, some are smaller. How do you figure out, like, for example, and the or in? Some of them are capitalized, and even though they're shrunk, they're capitalized. How do you differentiate which one you would want to go through, or is it just a matter of make a good mistake or see what it looks like? Or
part of that is feel. Yes, part of that is just saying, does that look right? And sometimes it doesn't. Like in here, like all the letters here are capitalized in the subtitle, but the in and the are smaller, so they're essentially lowercase, where the other words are capitalized. A lot of times your little connector words, your articles and your prepositions and that kind of stuff, especially the smaller ones, just don't typically carry a capital letter. I come from a publishing background, so that's I've kind of developed kind of a feel for that over time. But I think that's part of what goes on. But there are questions about that. I'm trying to remember. Let me see if we got it. Working on a cover for Kelly's book, One Little Wish. This was just a mock-up I did. She was struggling to kind of put this together. You may have seen this out on Facebook, but so I actually, when I first did this, had this as lowercase and One Little Wish, and I was debating with that. I think it probably works better with uppercase, but again, sometimes it's just feel, and sometimes it's just what works better. Down here, you know, the written by and the illustrated by, I think they work better as lowercase because it kind of de-emphasizes those words, but emphasizes the names of the author and illustrator. We did the same thing here with her. This is something quick I threw together for her. She wants to call this book part of a series called a storybook saga, but you know, made those lowercase, and I think it just kind of again, it's just a lot of it is just kind of design feel.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Other questions?
Anybody else have a question? This was really helpful. I think this has been a pleasure. I know I learned a lot, and most importantly, what we all need to know as authors is self-publishing doesn't mean we do it by ourselves. We need to have graphic designers, illustrators, and people that are going to complement our own skill set in order to have the best possible product in our books. So get yourself. So I want to give you an opportunity also, Clay, to talk. I know you're busy doing your book and doing a Kickstarter, and you're probably really backed up right now. But if anyone wanted to reach out to you for a future opportunity to do some graphic design on their books, is that something that you're doing, and how would they be able to reach you?
It is, as you've seen, I've done a lot of work for different folks in this group. One of the things that I'm pushing online is logos. I've done Stacey Bauer's logo for her Cami Kangaroo series, and then her Hop Off the Press logo that you may have seen more recently. Kim Ann has this Lucky Four press that we just did recently as well. So anyway, and then these were for Kelly Posnegas. We did 3 different options for her family book night series. She ended up going with this one. But anyway, I'm happy to consult. A lot of times I'll just do some brief consulting, and I'm happy to do that for free. I mean, just hit me up on Facebook, and that's probably the easiest way to find me most of the time. And I'm, if you just want to run something by me, have me look at something, I'm happy to do that. A lot of times it ends up turning into something bigger than that, and then we can talk about what projects you might have, if it's a cover, if it's a full book layout. Again, my time is limited, and I'm trying to move ahead with my own books, so I am a little swamped at the moment. And I have a full-time job and 4 kids, but
So you do this in your free time.
This is my whatever free time between 11 p.m. and 1 in the morning is, but you guys are all living that life, so you know what it's like. But anyway, don't hesitate. I love being a resource for this community. It's been a lot of fun just to get to know a lot of folks and contribute what I can to all the work that so many of you are doing. So please don't hesitate. And if I can't do it, I'll tell you that. But I am happy to be considered. And So
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for everything you do for this community. It's really much appreciated. And it's great. I haven't had you before in our work group, but we'll definitely bring you back again. This was really great information. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Oh, glad to be a part of it. So this was a lot of fun.
Can I ask a quick question?
Okay, go ahead, Serena.
Thanks, Clay, for all the information. Such great information. And best of luck on your Kickstarter.
Thank you.
I don't know, how long are you going to be dedicating time to your Kickstarter? Because I don't want to bombard you. So and I know that you have a full-time job in life in general, but about what time frame? Because I'm looking at getting a logo done, and would love some input and help. But I just kind of want to. I don't want to bombard you while you're in the middle of a big campaign.
Well, I'm hoping to launch in the next 2 to 3 weeks. But there's a lot to do between now and then. So but I really, I need the book in hand for the Christmas season. And so that means I really need to get files to the printer by probably mid-July or something like that. Especially if I print in China. I'm not sure where I'm going to print yet, but either China or somewhere in the States. But I'll actually be doing a print run. And in order to do that, I just need a lot of lead time. So, but by late summer, by late July into August, I should have a little bit more time if that works with your schedule. So.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
Great.